Welcome to the podcast about investing in startups, where existing investors can learn how to get the best deal possible, and those that have never before invested in startups can learn the keys to success from the venture experts. Your host is Nick Moran, and this is The Full Ratchet.
Welcome back to TFR for another edition of Investor Stories. On this segment, the experts talk about a startup that failed and the causes of that failure. Here's the segment called Post-Mortems. On today's special segment, we have Leah Sullivan of Fuel Capital. Leah, can you tell us a story about a portfolio company that failed and why it failed?
You know, it's so early in our portfolio. I'm going to try to think of a good example, particularly since I've been involved over the last 3 years. You know, I haven't seen companies shut down, but I have seen companies struggle to get that next round of funding done. And I think, that can be a path to failure. Certainly felt that way for me, actually, when I was raising our last round of funding, and it was really, really hard. At times, it definitely felt like a failure. You know, I think in those cases, sometimes it has nothing to do with the company and how they're operating, but it has to do a lot with sort of the dynamics of the fundraise. It has to do with the cycle of the investors and their funds are in, and things as an entrepreneur that you may not think about or may not fully understand. I certainly didn't. I think the fundraising dynamics is one that can kill a company, but really has nothing to do with your particular company or how well you're building your business.
Very true. On today's special segment, we have Oren Klaff of Intersection Capital. Oren, can you tell us a story about a portfolio company that failed and why it failed?
Oh my gosh. We had a company, I'm not going to name it, but early stage company. They were doing a really good job. They were in the accounting SaaS plugin space. They had good traction, had done some promotions and had a couple 100,000 users. And we put some capital in, and we helped the founder develop the pitch, a family guy, a couple of kids and a wife. And he was working very, very, very hard. He was taking the stress of capital raising, internalizing it, on the road. And sadly, he had a heart attack and passed away.
Oh, no.
And so that's one that never leaves my mind, because this is just work. You've got to have yourself and your family first, and the work can just be the work. But people internalize this to being synonymous with their life. The raising money equals life, and it's not. So that's the one I'll never forget.
Wow. It's really unfortunate. On this special installment of Investor Stories, we have Jason Whitney of IU Ventures. Jason, can you tell us a story about a portfolio company that failed and why it failed?
Yeah, and actually, I kind of fall into the same category as an entrepreneur myself. Getting underwater, behind, and thinking you can dig yourself out on your own without letting anybody know that you need some help. Being too proud to let anybody know that you need some help, and until it's too late. And thankfully, my story as a personal entrepreneur and founder was someone recognized that. My dad recognized that for me, that I was getting underwater, and probably the fact that I gave myself shingles didn't help me hide
Yikes.
that. But yeah, that was bad news. And,
Stress, man.
He helped to recognize that and took a bunch of that work off my plate, and really probably helped save my business at the time. And we've had at least one portfolio company that really didn't recognize that in a timely manner, and you spend a lot of time spinning their wheels trying to bring it back to the top. So I think that's my lesson there is, when you need help, raise your hand and say you need help, because there's people there that want to help you and investors that want to help you do that, but you have to recognize it and tell people.
So how do you change sort of your approach as an investor to make sure that, startups are asking for that help when they need it?
Yeah, it really is having that open line of conversation with those folks and encouraging people in their monthly or quarterly updates to their investors and their vested parties to list out things that they need. Because if you can let people know in advance that there are needs coming up, people will help you. I always read that section of reports that I get from people and see if there's ways that our team can address those needs. And one of our portfolio companies recently, they had 2 or 3. We addressed them for them immediately that day and helped to stop some of the things that they had going on. I think that's a good tool to be able to use for an entrepreneur.
On today's special segment, we have Darren Bechtel of Brick and Mortar Ventures. Darren, can you tell us a story about a portfolio company that failed and why it failed?
Let's see. Yeah, without naming names, in our earlier days, and I think, again, this would be based on sort of where we are in our own journey and how young of a firm it still is. Most of the real failures that I've seen have been before we had our sort of first fund of pooled capital ready to go, when still there were some limitations on capital and, regularly in a position of following a lead instead of leading a deal. There were some situations in which we were a small enough investor and didn't have a large enough seat at the table that an outsider, unfamiliar with construction, sort of a generalist, made some dangerous assumptions about how the industry actually worked or specific elements of the industry. I think it's common for many people in an effort to try to relate to something new. Many investors will try to relate to whatever opportunity they're looking at. And so for the bulk of generalist investors, their experience with construction is limited to perhaps a remodel or overseeing and being involved in a build out of a new office space, maybe a ground up construction on a dream home, assuming that the world of construction is like that, building a city of the future or a power plant or an airport is just like that experience of building a pool house can be pretty dangerous. And there have been a couple of occasions in my sort of early days of venture investing when I was just a small person on the cap table that shortly after investing in what, I thought was a great idea, pursuing sort of a grander vision for construction, lead investors and board members sort of pivoted and focused a little bit more on easily relatable solutions, looking at more of consumer SaaS models or consumer marketplaces and saying, clearly construction is, a commodity industry, commodity task, commodity labor, great. Perfect opportunity for, efficient marketplace. Why can't we have, and this is not a specific example, but of a portfolio company, but why can't we have an Uber of laborers? That could be easy. Why can't we have an Amazon of construction materials? That should be easy. And it's not. There's a lot of nuances around regulations or just contract types that, sort of make it too challenging and unlike any other industry to be able to make meaningful change in construction. And so, those sort of the one in particular that I'm thinking of, there was a radical change, a meaningful redirection of the company immediately following the financing that I disagree with and tried to voice my opinion with. And, maybe in time and with enough capital, they could have succeeded in their mission. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, the idea that I had invested in and still believe that there's great opportunity for sort of fell by the wayside. Hindsight's always 20/20. I could sort of share my thoughts of why their new vision failed, but that doesn't really matter. That helped solidify in my mind why, we needed to be able to raise a traditional institutional fund, be in a position that we could lead rounds, have sufficient capital to be able to have a voice at the table and avoid, potentially having to go along for the ride behind people that didn't really understand the problem as well as we thought.
Yes.
This way we're in charge of our own destiny. Any failure we experience is our own. And it's nice, you're held accountable then. But
love that. I was just having a conversation last week with some interns that we have from prestigious business schools. Mm-hmm. And 2 of them are consultants for, top tier, or were consultants for top tier strategy firms. And their instinct coming in was to they sized up a startup and applied a mental model and said, no, here's what you got to be doing, not this. And no, that's not how this works, guys. The founder knows 100x more about this than you do, and appreciate some strategic insight, of course, right? It's valuable, but there's not a one size fits all solution, especially in certain specific sectors. That will conclude this installment of Investor Stories. If you're enjoying the program and would like to see it continue, take a moment and leave a 5-star review in iTunes. Also, if you'd like updates on new content from TFR, as well as the top 10 VC articles every week, go to fullratchet.net and sign up for the newsletter. Okay, that will wrap things up for today. Until next time, over-prepare, choose carefully, and invest confidently. Thanks for joining me.